Hello and welcome to this EIFL's webinar on best practices in repositories. We're very happy to see you, and we picked up 3 topics today. One is visibility and interoperability of repositories with a special focus on DSpace repositories, and Friedrich has kindly agreed to share the experiences from COAR on how visible DSpace repositories are and what can be done to improve visibility. So that's the first part of our conversation. Second part will cover COAR controlled vocabularies, why it's important to use them and how they could be implemented. And then Michael has kindly agreed to share their experiences in upgrading DSpace repositories in Uganda. So that's all for the agenda, and over to you, Friedrich. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. First thing is to start my presentation. And take a look. Just one moment. Lena, can you see it?
Yes, but there is
Is this my total screen? Okay, I'll try it
yes,
again.
it was your total
Yes.
background. And I didn't mention that Milica will be covering COAR controlled vocabularies because Milica and I were involved in translating the latest version into our language.
Okay, this should be the tab now and not the window, I hope.
Yes. Now.
Okay, that's better, yes. No, I have so many tabs open, so it's always a problem to find the right and correct one. Okay, thank you for your introduction. My name is Friedrich Summann, German name. I'm working for the aggregator service COAR in the UK from the Open University. And I will tell you about my experiences with repositories and their integration and their indexing. So regarding to connectivity and visibility of those repositories. Okay, the next slide, I hope. You can see it,
yes.
Irina?
Yes.
Okay, this is a short overview what COAR is doing. COAR is at the moment indexing metadata records in an amount of 317 million. We have integrated more than 12,000 data providers, repositories mostly, from 150 countries, around 150 countries. We have 46 million full text hosted, stored by the COAR service. And those documents are delivered in more than 90 different languages. And related to the topic of today, we have around 1,800 installations based on DSpace in COAR. I want to introduce some characteristics from my experience on DSpace. DSpace is widely used, thousands of installations worldwide, and I have try to integrate them in for more than 1,000 cases. It's a very broad global community with a lot of resources presented. It's an approved and stable out-of-the-box system. It's extendable, for example, used for research data as well, or for quiz functionality in the last years. Yeah, it's reliable because it's based on more than 20 years of development history. And the metadata, and I must mention that most of the aggregators are looking for the Dublin core metadata delivered, are well structured and mostly complete. But, and I will talk about that more in detail, there are some technical problems and challenges, mostly related to configuration issues. And I will talk about that problems and how they could be solved more in detail now. Yeah, where it all began. I have visited the MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2003, and this was my first meeting with DSpace at that time. And it was a small office room and a talk with the project lead. And I think there were 2 developers working for the Java source code of DSpace at that time. But naturally, it's a long history, and there has been done a lot of work for that. And what I have done as a screenshot here is the institutional repository at the MIT, which is still working. And I have mentioned here the URL for that repository. From my specific technical point of view, I am mostly looking more in detail to the OAI PMH interface. And I will talk about that now in a lot of details, I think. So, and my recommendation as well is take a look at these interface. It's no problem to do that with your browser. And I will show how to do that now. This first slide with recommendations for improving the visibility, connectivity, and quality of DSpace of your repository I have filled it in at this time to give an overview what I will talk about, and I will repeat it in the last phase as well to summarize all these aspects again. So I will start with the first issue, checking the OAI PMH interface via browser, or especially as a second possibility to use the OAI PMH validator, and I have added here one of those with the URL. So normally you can take this URL in red, which is the list records call. Most of the aggregators are using the list records because it's efficient. And what I get when I fill it into the browser and start it is this page normally. This is a first starting part of the list records call, and you see some of the Dublin core metadata which are presented here. And you can take a look whether this is okay, whether this is what you expect from your metadata interface. And if this occurs, the first step is already successful, I would say. But we have a lot of potential OAI PMH problems, and I see them mostly more than one time daily. The first problem, and I sorted it for the different steps of my work, is the interface is not enabled, not activated, which is a configuration issue. Then I more often see directly internal server errors because no one has looked, obviously, for the functionality of the interface. Then I more often see security errors, security messages which prevent using the interface. The next problem I often, very frequently, probably the most frequent problem is the call is answered with a no records match message. So there is contents obviously in the repository, but there is no contents given in the list records call. Then bigger problem is the handle connectivity is not configured, which leads to wrong URLs. This is a problem, and I will talk about that more in detail later. Then not working local links are used, which means if you are not using the handle service in the United States from Virginia and you use local document links, then more often it happens that they are not correct and that are not working. And the last major problem is the list records call crashes at a certain moment, which prevents the full functionality and the full range of data delivered. Okay, let's come to the problems in detail and how they occur in the interface. When I fill in this base URL, then it more often happens that I get this 404 message from the browser. Page not found, that means the URL is not working. The interface, the OAI PMH interface is not enabled, or the base URL is modified, and I do not have this standard format. The next potential problem, which I see more often as well, is there directly occurs the internal server error. This must be a configuration problem as well, and you see it directly when you use one of these common base URL calls. This should be avoided. This is an Apache web server problem. Another problem, security risk. So this has to be a problem with the configuration of the website, mostly related to certificates. So it's HTTPS based, and this prevents normally the usage for the end user, but as well for the harvester activities. The second screenshot shows another problem, which is shown by the browser in this cases. Yeah, this is the problem I mentioned earlier. This is the OAI error message, which I get when I fill in list records, and it says no records match. So no metadata are delivered. This is a normal OAI, correct OAI response, but the content is just not really fulfilling for different reasons. My idea about that is the connection to the internal database or the Lucene search service is not correct and has to be repaired to enable the delivering of metadata. This is the message which shows the problem. Next problem, which I see more often when I take a first look at metadata, is that I see this DC identifier URL, which is the not configured version of the URL, and which prevents the aggregator to fill in a link to the document itself. So this is a real problem for the visibility of the service. And when I try to link to the URL, I get this handlenet error message, which gives some more detailed information about that situation. The next related problem is there is a normally working handle URL with an identifier which looks okay and correct, but when I try to reach this URL, I get this message. And this has to do with the configuration of the handle service in DSpace as well. There is an ID which is not working, which is not registered at the service in Virginia. And this leads then to this message. So the aggregator service is not able to link to the document and to the metadata in practice. And this should be naturally, obviously avoided. The next problem dealing or related to the same environment is the link is a local link, so no connectivity to the handle service, but the link is not correct and is not working as well. So in this case, I see localhost URL, which cannot fulfill the document call. And the message I get when I try to do that is just unable to connect from the web server. A little bit more difficult is when the configuration looks, on the first glance, looks okay, but the URL is not working as well. So in this case, it looks relatively correct, but the message I get is the same way because it's somewhere a difference in between the real URL working for the document shown in most cases in the end user interface and what I get delivered by the OEI PMH interface. For example, in this case, in many cases in the DSpace user GUI interface, I'll get this information about the URI. In this case, it works, but it's not the same way I get it from the OEI PMH interface. So there's a difference, and this makes the URL inoperable. And now this screenshot shows the last relevant problem I see more often in practice is the list records crashes at a certain step. And when in this case, you can take a look at the URL, it crashes at 47,000 documents. So the list records based on the resumption token handling delivers step by step the different metadata, and on a certain step it just crashes. And the reason mostly is related to specific character encodings. UTF-8 obviously, or control characters in the metadata records, and can be repaired. I more often write some emails to repository manager, and in many cases they are able to repair the situation and to prevent this. Normally, this leads to the fact that the aggregator service only is able to harvest a subset of the metadata available at the repository. And this is naturally a certain problem. This brings me to my last recommendation. I more often have problems to contact the responsible technical people of the repository to give some information about problems related to the repository. And here on this slide, I have a screenshot which with the email contact address, which is given in the OEI PMH identify response. And it's obviously not configured as well. This is a default version. And I see this in hundreds of responses, in fact, in practice. So this should be configured, otherwise I am not able to write an email to a certain person. And the other possibility more often is there is a feedback form at the end user interface. And my experience more often is there is no response when I try to use it. So contacting the correct people for giving some information about problems is not an easy thing, is my experience. Okay, and this screenshot shows the different versions related to DSpace upgrading versions of the history. You see the first format of the base URL probably from 20 years ago, and more often upgrading the version means the standard format of the base URL changes, and the aggregator in many cases have no idea about that. So you see these different formats more often when I detect a new repository based on DSpace. I try all of these formats to detect the correct one. And it's often a problem when the base URL is changed because of a version upgrade. The aggregator service has no idea about that and only sees there is a problem. The repository does not respond anymore, and so it's always a crucial task to find the solution how to solve that. So a redirect between those different formats is strongly recommended. So, and as I have talked to you earlier, this is my list of previous recommendations as a summary. So the first thing is take a look at your base URL, at your OEI PMH interface using the browser, and eventually try OEI PMH validator, for example, the one at Open Archives, which I mentioned here, to take a look for the details. Take a look at your configuration, especially for OEI PMH, for enabling it, for the handle connectivity. Deliver correct contact addresses to make the work of the aggregator service easier. And take a look at the incoming feedback to perhaps repair those problems. From my experiences, it's always fine to make global users possible to use the interface. For example, in some cases, I see some end user interfaces which I cannot read. And this is the same situation naturally for users from other regions as well. Pay attention to the metadata quality. This is an issue we'll talk about later in this webinar as well. And then register your repository at the common registries. Open Door is one of them, Open Archives, or your local listings, for example. And last recommendation, there are different guidelines for the usage of repositories and the repository interfaces. I have mentioned the one from COAR, and take a look what you can optimize with your repository. And yeah, this was the last issue, and I can only thank you for paying your attention to this experience of mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very, very valuable. We've been discussing with Friedrich that one of the next steps could be developing a resource, how those issues that Friedrich highlighted could be fixed using, if you use DSpace, because I guess we'll just focus on DSpace because most of us use DSpace, but if someone is interested in other platforms, let us know and we could also add that. So as a minimum, we promise you that we'll produce how to resource on fixing those issues. And the question to you, if you already have experience in fixing them, would you like to work with us on that resource? And if you would like, could you please write that in the chat? We also have some colleagues here attending from the National Library of Armenia, where we discussed collaboration on fixing issues with their DSpace repository and also rolling out support program in the country. We also have Michael on the call who will be talking about Uganda experiences, and maybe if Michael is interested, we could also check how it works in Uganda. And if there are other people on the call who would like to work with us to fix those issues, for example, if you have those issues, if you already seen them, or if you identify them, and if you would need help, let us know and we'll try to help you. If you coordinate your repository activities on the national level, and if you would like to work with us to help other repositories in the country to improve those issues, please also let me know in the chat, because it's really important, because then if your APMH protocol isn't enabled properly, then you're missing a lot of opportunities. You're missing visits, downloads, and fixing those issues is really easy. So I hope that that's a small project that we will undertake this year. Thanks a lot, Friedrich, for reaching out and for offering your help, because you're one of the best experts in this area in the world. So we're really grateful that you're interested and willing to help. And I don't really see any questions in the chat. I see, Maya, that you raised your hand. I don't know whether you wanted to speak or whether it was by mistake, because I think you raised it when we started. So maybe you could write in the chat if it's not a mistake, and I'll let you speak. I'll share Friedrich's presentation. I'll be in touch about the resource. If someone would like to work with us on this resource, please say so in the chat. And I think it's a good segue to Milica's talk, because Friedrich mentioned that it's important to use controlled vocabularies, and Milica will now talk about some examples of controlled vocabularies that we've been involved with and would like to encourage you to use. Over to you, Milica.
Let me unmute myself first. So yes, this is a good switch. And when I talk to librarians and we mentioned controlled vocabularies, librarians usually mean subject controlled vocabularies, those you use to normalize keywords, etc. But I won't be talking about this because I'm not an expert on this topic. We haven't implemented those in the repositories I'm working with, because this is a huge challenge. Many of those controlled vocabularies, subject controlled vocabularies are proprietary, so they are not free. And if you're working with a multidisciplinary repository, it's difficult which of those to choose. I'll be talking about something easier to implement and something, I guess, more obvious. So here on the left, you can see some pieces of code. And this is how the OAI-PMH protocol displays the information that something is in open access, a publication, let's say. So it matters how you input this information. It's not the same for the machines. It's not the same if you're using capital letters, if you're using small letters, if you're using any dashes or hyphens, etc. Or if you put this information in different languages. So on the right, you can see how a repository interprets this information. So you can see that, for example, somebody made a typo or somebody wrote just open, and the machine didn't understand that this is the same as open access. It's separate. This is something that is for the machine. It's not easy to interpret what it is. So it is very important when you're providing this information to provide it in a unified, standardized way, and to use always the same form of this information, this metadata. In order to achieve this, we are using control vocabularies that define not subjects, but define resource types, access rights, version types, etc. There may be different types of those control vocabularies, and we are mentioning those COAR control vocabularies because they are developed specifically for repositories. They're developed by volunteers, by the community, and as Irina mentioned before, we volunteered to provide translations into different languages so they can be expanded with every version. New languages are added. And we are usually trying to identify the community people who would like to commit to create those vocabularies. And I'll now go online to show you how this looks like. And you will get a presentation, but everything else that I will show I'll show it online. So this is the home page of those vocabularies, and there are 3 types. And for each type, you have the concepts that are clickable. They're linked, and if you want, for example, to see how research proposal is named in different languages, you can see the full list of those languages. Also, here you have different formats that can be exported in different formats, and you see the list of contributors. And this is the same for all these vocabularies. In the presentation, you will find, for example, access rights, because I was talking about this, and this is open access. So in all these cases, for all these cases, you will find in the presentation, you will find a link to the implementation guidelines that Irina has kindly put here. So we are using those. This is the XML code for one of those concepts, and you can see that this is defined in different languages. These vocabularies are operationalized in various guidelines and open air guidelines in Europe. And not only in Europe, we are using open air guidelines because open air is maintaining a research graph that actually is underlying a huge infrastructure, huge search engine, Open Air Explorer. And they developed guidelines, currently version 4. This is the current version, and those core terms are included, and it's actually, those guidelines say how you should code them into your repository. So many repositories are using this, and my repository is also using this, but it's like the previous version. So how it looks like in a repository, I will show you on an example. So this is a record from the repository, and here you see this is human readable information. So we are not saying here anywhere on this page that this is open access. So it's here, it's replaced by this icon. But if I go to full item record, you will see that there is this information, DC rights, and it's open access. It's like this. When I input information, when I'm filling out the submission form, I have a drop-down list that actually doesn't show what you saw open access like this here. It's in Serbian, it's like human readable information. So any researcher who is using the repository, they're choosing from a drop-down list, and they're choosing the information that is clear to them, that they can interpret easily. On the other hand, I'd like to show this OAI PMH protocol. So this is what Friedrich has already shown. And if I go here to the open air context, I will see this information coded. So if we go to DC rights, I will see this information coded like this. So I choose from a drop-down open access in my mother tongue. It's coded like open access in the database, but the OAI PMH protocol is set up to display it in the way that OpenAir expects it expects this to see. And this is understandable. This is understandable in all the languages. It's language agnostic. So it's coded in the way machines understand this. So it's very important. I don't know how to make this myself, but it's very important for me as a repository manager to be able to explain to IT people who are developing the repository that they need to use controlled vocabularies and that they need to use particular guidelines to code this information in the way that will be understandable to machines. That's all from me. So I can answer some questions if you wish, but that was simple and practical.
Milica, and I put a link to implementation guidelines, and there is a part about DSpace, and I think we'll enrich that a bit, pointing to how they could be implemented in different versions of DSpace, because the document that I included was produced in 2020. So it points to some implementation examples for, I think, still version 5 of DSpace. So that's also something that we'd like to work on this year to help repositories implement them. And maybe if you already implemented controlled vocabularies in your repositories, you could share your experiences. There was a question from Tafros before Milica started and after Friedrich's talk. Are there any other identifiers that can be used on DSpace than a handle? So handle is important for configuring OA PMH. But of course, if you can also use persistent identifiers for documents, for example, DOIs or ARCs, if you could use persistent identifiers for people, ORCIDs, if you could use persistent identifiers for organization ROR, that would all increase interoperability of content and will make it easier to connect, for example, publication which is available in your repository with research data that is related to that publication. So maybe this topic of persistent identifiers in repository is also a topic that we'll cover in some support materials. But Friedrich and Milica, Michael, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, I have read the question as well, and I related it more to the question whether it is needed to use the official handle service. Naturally, you can configure local handles. There is handle given as well in the URL, but it's only related to the local environment, and so there are no costs for that configuration, but yeah, it has to be done correctly, that the URL is working. But I had both versions, or 3 or 4 different versions in my presentation, and the real needed thing is the URL is working. Naturally, you can fill in different other identifiers, as you mentioned, DOIs and so on. Even a classification scheme can be found in the DC identifier or the citation, for example.
Thanks a lot.
So if I may, yes, why handles are used. So you can use those local handles, but it's recommended to use the persistent handles. And handles are widely used because they are the cheapest, because you pay an annual subscription that is about $50 or something, and then you get free handles. You can also implement DOIs, but it's costly. And as for other identifiers, so in my repository we are using ORCIDs, but we have issues. We don't really know how to display them via the OAI PMH protocol, and it would be good to try to find experts and organize a webinar about this, because this would solve for problems. So our IT team, they know how to display them via the default DSpace, it's DIM or something like this, export format, but they are not still able to integrate them in the OAI PMH interface.
Okay, perhaps I can add something to that. I was a member of the German National ORCID project, and we were talking about the metadata quality and how to fill in ORCIDs as well. And we did a recommendation for Germany at that time in the certificate. It's really crucial because it's related to the author. And the author normally is free looking for a format. So we can find sometimes in metadata this information added to the author name normally, but there is no real rule for that. This is a problem. And we tried to solve that in Germany, but not so many repositories are using it even in Germany, I must say.
We found
So
some.
it's still a problem.
We found some recommendations, but our IT team said they wouldn't be sustainable. And also there is an issue of displaying those in the meta tags, in HTML meta tags. There is no standardized solution.
Yeah.
But basically, if you can integrate, even if you can't display them effectively, it's good to use them in the repository locally. And then if you have them there, when a solution appears, we will probably be able to implement it.
I think it should be better in newer versions of DSpace. There is also a question from Jagadish. Is there any metadata consistency? I mean, can anyone use metadata other than Dublin core? So usually it's related to your repository software. Repository software comes with some predefined metadata standards, and I guess it's better to use those predefined metadata standards for the reasons Friedrich mentioned in his talk, that that will give you quality metadata. I don't know if Friedrich, Milica, or Michael have any comments on that.
You may use other standards, you may even combine them, but it's when you're exposing something. I mean, I'm displaying this in lay terms because I don't know how to make it, but I know that there is something called crosswalk. So where you actually translate your metadata in your repository into something readable to external machines. So even if you're using different standards, you need to expose this according to the standard via the OAPMH protocol. But it's always try to use standards, not something that is just, not standardized.
Yeah, that's correct from my experience, because if you're not using the standard, the aggregator services normally have to use an efficient way to prepare those metadata before indexing. And this means we are very familiar with the standard ways, but if you do not use it in that way, there will be a lack of information afterwards. This is my experience. Because it's not efficient to from the aggregator position to take a look for a very specific crosswalk for every repository. It cannot be done for thousands of repositories, in fact.
Well, I guess we can move on to Michael's presentation. Michael is from Consortium of Uganda University Libraries, and they just had a project where they assisted repositories with upgrading to newer version of DSpace. So over to you, Michael.
Sure. All right, my name is Michael Mutebi, and I'm a system administrator in one of the universities and a member of CUUL. We undertook a project of installations. 5 of those, this was done by CUUL, the Consortium, the University Consortium for Libraries. So 5 of these installations were upgrades to DSpace 7.6. Most of them were coming from 6.4. to 7.6, which was the latest stable. So 5 were upgrades and 5 of them were fresh installations. Also installations to DSpace 7.6. 6 of them are online. 6 of the 10 are online, whereas 4 are still offline. That's one of the challenges I'll be talking about. So the general challenges, DSpace 7.6, which we're upgrading to, has several technologies involved. And there are challenges that come with that. Then there's cybersecurity hurdles, which I'll elaborate on, and the issue of the domain name and secure access SSL. So we've got several technologies with DSpace 7.6 and also DSpace 8, I think. We've got the PostgreSQL, which is the database. We've got Java, which runs the backend, Apache, Apache Solar, which is used for indexing and real-time indexing and searching. Tomcat is the web server for the back end of DSpace. Then we've got Node.js, which is a server-side for the front end. PM2, a processor manager for JavaScript. And then we've got Apache or Nginx, which we use for proxying to Tomcat. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 technologies to run DSpace. And they come with challenges. We've got an issue of resource utilization, and also troubleshooting is difficult with all these technologies. Typically, we usually run the back end of DSpace and the front end on the same machine. And this is very common for institutions which don't have a lot of resources, server resources. Ideally, we should be running these on separate servers. That would be the ideal. But because of resource constraints, we have them all on the same machine. Now, all of these technologies, the ones we've looked at here, all these being on the same machine, they use a lot of memory and CPU resources. For example, there is a repository for Clark University, which when I installed, I put the back end and the front end on the same server. And when I started the front end by running PM2, the front end just hung, it couldn't start. But the back end was working fine. And on checking, I saw that the memory was being consumed by the front end, Node.js. It was consuming almost all the memory on the computer. But then the other installations I did for the other universities, they all worked fine on the same machine. So that's one issue with all those technologies, resource utilization on the same machine. It's something I found challenging. Then another challenge that comes with all those technologies is troubleshooting becomes difficult. Most of us system administrators, we are not specifically working with DSpace. We're working with so many other things. You work with the COAR, the library system. You work with the library portal or website. And you cannot be conversant with all those very many technologies that DSpace is using. So, when you get a challenge with DSpace, the troubleshooting really becomes difficult, because the problem could be with the proxy. Sometimes it could be with, which is Apache or Nginx. The problem sometimes could be with Tomcat, which is something else. It could be with Java, it's something else. It could be, so when there is a problem, there's a challenge with troubleshooting because of those many technologies. So usually what we do is that we go to the internet and try to look for a solution or a workaround to get the system running, but you never really know what went wrong because you're not an expert at the system. So what I did for Clark University is that I decided to install the backend on one server and the front end on the other server, and it worked. But I still don't know what went wrong. Then after the several technologies, there's an issue of cybersecurity. We have the IT officers, the cybersecurity people at the institutions. Many of them are not familiar with DSpace. So, sometimes you need some ports to be open. Like, for example, port 8000, TCP and 2641 for UDP for the handle. Those are not very common ports. Usually they have port 80 for HTTP, then they've got 443 for HTTPS. So if you ask them to open port 8000 or 2641, they are suspicious. Why do you want it open? And sometimes they don't know how to open it because they have their firewall installed by somebody else, and they only have port 80 open by default. So if you ask them to open port 8000, sometimes they don't know how to do it. So that is a bit of a challenge because you finish the installation without the handle server working. And even the installation becomes difficult if you don't have that flexibility of opening and closing ports. So this issue made remote installation a bit difficult. Sometimes we would have to travel to the site and try and install it without any firewall issues. But then even still, after the installation, when you're putting it back up, the port issues arise again. So lastly, there's an issue of DSpace. Most IT people, or maybe the library, they do not really appreciate the need for the repository to be on the internet. They always think it can be on the LAN local. And the repository really being on the LAN doesn't really serve the purpose of visibility. And it's not just having it on the LAN, there's issues of giving it a domain name because ideally it needs a domain name and secure access, SSL. And the IT people they're not really willing to give you this, to provide for you a domain name, so to give you a public IP. It's a hassle to get them to do that. And that's because they don't quite know what DSpace is for. They think it's like a library system, like you have, or they don't quite understand that it has to be, it has to be global. It has to be picked up by the whole world, and it has to be secure as well. So that has also been a challenge. We have some of the repositories we installed are offline, like 5 of them. They're only accessible on the LAN. And ideally that one is with the sensitization, perhaps maybe, we'll be able to have all of them online. We're still proceeding. So basically those are the 3 challenges I could talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very useful, and I guess it explains some of errors that Friedrich was getting, because if there is no access to the port, so if there are some concerns from IT personnel when they don't want to open up, then handle is not properly configured. Any questions to Michael? And thanks a lot, Michael, for doing this work. CUUL for us is always an example how repository support could be offered on consortium level. Thanks a lot for that.
You're welcome.
I guess for the next steps, we will work on this resource about visibility of repositories, enable OAPMH, and maybe this resource will also be useful for IT people at universities to convince them that they should be more flexible and they should understand that repository is different from library automation system, for example, or any other library system that they are supporting. So then we'll try to see what we can do with persistent identifiers other than handle. If you have any questions or issues for future discussions, maybe you can drop a link, not a link, maybe you can write in the chat which topics you would like to see covered in our next webinars, because we would like to continue this kind of webinars for repository managers. And I was thinking maybe it would be useful to talk about human aspect of repositories, what a repository manager does on the daily basis, like how a day of repository manager looks like, because maybe that would be interesting to compare how it works in different repositories. Then also Friedrich mentioned that it's important to have contact information, and maybe it's also a good moment to talk about pages in repositories, because it's also important to have policies in place and some more information what is that repository. So maybe that could be also a topic for our next discussions.
This is another one. The other one, which is used for
other platforms in DSpace. I guess, Jagadish, you need to be a little bit more specific. What are other platforms? I know that, like in your case, you're looking into Weka 3, but that's
it was it.
Maybe not so interesting to others.
Where you see those things as they move like this. This is the demarcation.
So for Weka, we can connect with you, Jagadish, one-on-one, and we can share experiences because we run that for Myanmar. And then I don't know if Drake is trying to say something, because I know that he's on the move. Drake is Michael's colleague from CUUL, who is also working on repository support. So maybe give a minute, and also a minute if you still have any questions, or if you would like to see any other topics covered in next webinars, or if you have any issues that we can help you with collectively, please write that in the chat. And I would like to thank once again Friedrich, Milica, and Michael for sharing their valuable experiences. It's always good to see how things work in practice, and it helps to compare what we are doing and improve. So I hope after this webinar, your repositories will become even better. Judah is asking if your DSpace is online and you want to restrict other collection. I guess it might be related to large data models collecting, scrapping content from repositories, even some specific past exam papers. Okay.
So
anyone have?
Yeah, we are doing this. This is supported, so you can control access in a very sophisticated way in DSpace on multiple levels. You can restrict the whole collection. you can restrict the collection in a way that not even metadata are seen, that they're just seen internally to the registered people. So there is the authorization section for individual items where you can do this, and you can also, in the collection settings, you can set up those things. For example, in the collection settings, you have this read item where you set up who can read the metadata. But be careful about this, because we had some people who are unintentionally restricted the access. So it's possible, I mean, we can, I don't know, once we can, or you can write to me and I will explain you how to do this. As for scraping content, basically we don't mind if those bots are scraping content because we want our content to be seen, but there is an issue of increased traffic. And last summer, the IT team of the University of Belgrade Computer Center, they spent months developing a solution how to manage those bots, because our websites were, they crashed, our repositories crashed due to increased traffic, and they developed a captcha tool that doesn't really affect normal traffic. And bots they have a contact information there, and bots, if they are doing research or something, they can contact them and they can whitelist them. So this is an ongoing challenge at the moment.
Which best DSpace recommended for a university setup?
Well, I would say the latest version always, because moving to the latest version when you have an old one is quite a challenge.
But is it the latest version as the latest version, or the latest stable release version? Because I think that's a question. And when I heard this question asked to DSpace developers, and they said it really depends what you want to do with your repositories. So you have to check what's available in the latest version of DSpace. You have to check what's available in the latest stable version, and then compare. And if this latest version, which is not stable yet, doesn't have any additional benefits compared to the latest stable version, then you just go with the latest stable. But if there is something useful in the newer versions of DSpace that will work for you, then you go for that newer version. Thanks a lot, and expect an email from me with slides and recording link. And thanks again for joining today, and thanks a lot, Michael, Friedrich, Milica, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.